It started, like most bad decisions do, with exhaustion, bone deep, soul crushing exhaustion. My name's Arlo, just Arlo, and after 3 days straight of staring at spreadsheets under flickering fluorescent lights, the gray cubicle walls felt like they were closing in. My eyes burned, my head throbbed, and the thought of the hour-long commute back to my cramped, silent apartment was unbearable. I needed to be anywhere else. That's when I saw the sign half hidden behind peeling advertisements for toothpaste and local politicians. Midnight meat train last stop rest. Departs platform 9, 11:58 p.m. It was crude, painted in a flaking dark red that looked too much like dried blood under the platform's sickly yellow lights. Rest, that word resonated like a gong in my hollowed out skull. Rest sounded perfect, better than perfect, necessary. The platform was deserted, not a soul, even the station attendant's booth was dark. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of damp concrete, distant diesel, and something else, something vaguely sweet and rotten, like forgotten fruit left in a hot car. I shivered, pulling my thin jacket tighter. Was this stupid? Probably, but the pull of that word rest was magnetic, and the train was already there, sighing on the tracks like a slumbering beast. An old locomotive, impossibly ancient, its black paint scarred and dull, pulling carriages that looked like they belonged in a museum or a nightmare. Dark windows, like dead eyes, reflected the weak platform. Lights. The doors wheezed open with a sound like a dying man's last breath. Inside, the air was thick, warm, and carried that sweet rotten smell stronger now, mixed with stale sweat and old meat. The lighting was dim, cast by flickering gas lamps mounted on the walls, throwing long, dancing shadows. The carriage was nearly full. Figures slumped in worn velvet seats, heads lolled back or resting against the grimy windows, asleep, all of them seemingly deep asleep. The silence was profound, broken only by the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the wheels and the low thrum of the engine, a sound that felt more like a heartbeat than machinery. I sank into the nearest empty seat, the springs groaning in protest. The velvet was stiff and cold beneath me. Relief washed over me, immediate and narcotic. The exhaustion won. My eyelids felt like lead weights. The rhythmic sway of the train, the deep silence punctuated only by the clack, 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 the warm, thick air. It was pulling me under faster than any sleeping pill. Just before sleep claimed me, a detail registered fuzzy at the edges of my consciousness. The man opposite me. He wore a dusty pinstripe suit. His skin was an unnatural gray waxy. His mouth hung slightly open, slack, and on his lapel was a dark, crusted stain, rust. I was too far gone to care. Rest. I needed rest. I slept, but it wasn't restful. It was thick, suffocating, like drowning in warm tar. Vague shapes moved through my dreams, slumped figures shuffling down endless, dark corridors. A low, guttural moaning that seemed to vibrate through the floor of the carriage. The smell, that sweet, wrought, intensified, filling my nostrils, coating my tongue. I dreamed of butcher shops, cold rooms hung with sides of beef that twitched. My eyes snapped open. The gas lamp above flickered violently, casting strobing shadows. How long had I slept? The train was still moving, the clack, clack, clack steady, but the silence was gone, replaced by a low, collective breathing, not the soft sigh of sleep. This was ragged, wet, like dozens of pairs of damaged lungs struggling to draw air. Huff, sh, huff, sh. I slowly turned my head. The man in the pinstripe suit was still opposite me, but his head was no longer slumped. It was tilted forward, chin resting on his chest. His eyes were open, wide open, milky white like poached eggs, filmed over with a viscous sheen. They weren't looking at anything, just staring into the space between us and his jaw. It was moving slowly, deliberately, up and down, like he was chewing on something impossibly tough. Grind, grind, grind. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed through my grogginess. I looked around. Every single passenger in my line of sight was in a similar state, heads lolled or tilted forward, milky eyes open and unseeing, jaws working silently or emitting those soft, wet chewing sounds. The woman 2 seats down, her floral dress stained dark across the bodice, had a thin line of blackish drool trailing from the corner of her slack mouth onto her shoulder. The old man by the window, his hat askew, was slowly, methodically flexing the fingers of one hand, the knuckles cracking with each movement. Crack, crack, crack. They weren't asleep, they were resting, but not in any way I understood. This wasn't sleep, this was suspension, a horrible, grotesque pause, and I was wide awake in the middle of it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sweat beaded on my forehead, cold despite the warm air. Don't move, don't breathe too loud, don't attract attention. The thoughts screamed in my mind. They seemed docile for now, but the air vibrated with a latent, terrible potential. The train lurched slightly as it rounded a bend. The man in the pinstripe suit swayed with the motion. His milky eyes rolled slowly, languidly in their sockets. They passed over the window, the ceiling lamp, and then stopped, fixed on me. The grinding of his jaw ceased. His head tilted, a slow, unnatural angle, like a broken doll's. A low sound began deep in his chest, not a moan, a rumble, like stones grinding together. Grr. He wasn't chewing anymore. He was focusing on me. The woman in the floral dress twitched, her drooling head lifted slightly, milky eyes swiveled towards the source of the sound, towards the pinstripe man. And then, inevitably, towards me. The old man by the window stopped flexing his fingers. His head swiveled on his neck with a sickeningly dry crick. One by one, like ghastly flowers turning towards a diseased sun, every slumped head in the carriage began to lift. Every pair of milky, sightless eyes began to swivel towards the disturbance, towards the living warmth, towards me. Huff, shh. The ragged breathing hitched, deepened. The low growl from the pinstripe man intensified. Groan. Others picked it up. A chorus of guttural rumbles filled the thick air, vibrating through the worn velvet seats, up through the soles of my shoes. The sound wasn't just in their throats. It felt like it came from the carriage itself, from the very metal and wood. The flickering gas lamp seemed to dim further, plunging us deeper into a twilight of shadows and staring dead eyes. They didn't move, not yet. They just watched, hungry, waiting. The tension was a physical thing, thick enough to choke on. That sweet rotten smell was overpowering now, mixed with the metallic tang of raw fear my own. My muscles screamed to run, to bolt for the end of the carriage, to find a conductor, anything. But a primal instinct, deeper than fear, held me frozen. Move, and they swarm. The woman in the floral dress moved first, not fast, not like in the movies. It was horrifyingly slow, deliberate, like rusted machinery grinding to life. Her hand, pale and mottled with dark splotches beneath the skin, lifted from her lap. Fingers, stiff and curled like claws, twitched. She placed it on the armrest, levered herself forward, inch by agonizing inch. Her milky eyes never left mine. The black drool dripped steadily onto the seat now. Plip, plip. It was a signal, like dominoes falling in slow motion. The pinstripe man pushed himself upright, his movements jerky, puppet-like. His head remained tilted at that unnatural angle, The old man by the window rose, his joints popping like firecrackers. Pop, crack, snap. Others stirred, heads tilted, bodies shifted. A low moan escaped one, a sound of profound, empty need. Oh, they were rising, all of them, slowly, awkwardly, but with terrifying inevitability. The space between us, which had felt claustrophobic before, now felt like a shrinking noose. The end of the carriage where the door to the next compartment must be seemed miles away, and standing between me and it were dozens of them, awake, aware, hungry. The pinstripe man took his first step. His leg didn't bend properly. It swung forward stiffly, his polished shoe scraping against the filthy carpet with a dry sound. He stumbled, caught himself with a lurch that made his head wobble grotesquely on his neck. But he kept coming. The floral dress woman shuffled forward, her movements stiff, her arms held slightly out from her sides for balance. The moaning grew louder, mingling with the snarling, forming a cacophony of hunger. Uo, Gurnan, Haen. Panic finally shattered my paralysis. No, the word ripped from my throat, raw and desperate. It echoed in the confined space, absurdly loud. The effect was instantaneous, electric. The milky eyes snapped wide, if possible, even blanker, yet burning with a sudden, ravenous intensity. The low growls erupted into full-throated, guttural roars. The slow shuffle became a jerking, lurching charge. They came at me, not with speed, but with horrifying, relentless momentum, like a wave of rotting meat given terrible purpose. The pinstripe man was closest, arms outstretched, fingers grasping. I ducked, scrambling backwards over the seat behind me, landing hard on the floor in the aisle. Velvet tore. Something sharp scraped my leg. I didn't care. I scrambled to my feet, slipping on something wet and sticky on the carpet. The floral dress woman was almost on me, her clawed hands swiping through the air where my head had been. A second before, I smelled the decay on her breath, thick and cloying. Get back! I screamed uselessly, fumbling behind me for anything, an umbrella stand, a fire extinguisher, but finding only more worn velvet and cold metal walls. The old man was blocking the aisle ahead, his mouth open impossibly wide in a silent roar, revealing broken, yellowed teeth. I had nowhere to go but backwards, deeper into the carriage, towards the source of the nightmare. I turned and ran, or tried to. The aisle was narrow, littered with fallen bags and unseen debris. Bodies lurched towards me from the seats on either side. Hands grabbed at my jacket, my arms. Fingers, cold and surprisingly strong, snagged my sleeve. I ripped free with a tearing sound, stumbling forward. A businessman missing half his face lunged from a seat, rotten teeth snapping inches from my shoulder. I shoved him back with both hands, my palms sinking slightly into the unnaturally firm, cold flesh of his chest. He fell back into his seat with a heavy thud, but was immediately struggling to rise again, snarling. It was a gauntlet of the dead. Every step was a battle against grabbing hands, snapping jaws, and the suffocating press of decaying bodies. The air was thick with their stench and their rage. My lungs burned, my vision blurred with sweat and terror. The door at the end of the carriage, it had to be there. It had to lead somewhere. Light. I needed light. The flickering gas lamps were almost useless, casting only deeper, dancing shadows that hid the grasping horrors until they were upon me. I reached the end, a heavy metal door with a grimy window reinforced with wire mesh. Beyond the glass, only darkness. I grabbed the handle, cold iron. I pulled, nothing, locked, or stuck, open. I screamed, hammering on the door with my fist. Bam! 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 The sound was swallowed by the roaring tide of the dead surging down the aisle behind me. They were close, so close, I could feel the chill radiating off them, hear the wet click of their jaws, the tearing sound of rotten fabric as they pushed against each other in their hunger to reach me. I turned, pressing my back against the cold, metal door. The tide was almost upon me. The pinstripe man led the charge, his suit torn, one arm hanging at a wrong angle, but his milky eyes fixed on me with pure, mindless hunger. It dripped a viscous, dark fluid that sizzled faintly where it hit the carpet. It quested blindly through the air, writhing with a horrible alien intelligence. The horde stopped inches from me. Their snarls died in their throats. Their reaching arms slowly lowered. Their milky eyes, which had burned with hunger moments before, now rolled upwards, fixed on the slithering horror emerging from the vent, not with fear, with reverence or submission. The tentacle, having tended to the front row, finally turned its questing tip towards me. It hovered inches from my face. I could see the pulsating veins beneath its glistening surface, smell the overwhelming fungal decay. A drop of the dark fluid fell onto my jacket sleeve. It didn't sizzle, but it felt unnaturally cold, seeping through the fabric instantly. It wasn't attacking. It was assessing, considering, was I fresh meat or potential cargo, potential rest? The thought was worse than being torn apart to become like them, forever riding this cursed train, fed by this abomination in the vents, waiting for what? My eyes darted frantically. The door was locked. The horde stood between me and the other end. The tentacle began to descend slowly towards my head. I could see the sucker mouth forming at its tip. No. I screamed again, not in terror this time, but in pure, desperate defiance. I ducked, rolling sideways along the wall, away from the probing horror. My hand slammed against a small recessed panel on the wall beside the door, a red emergency handle covered in grime and a thick spider web. But I was already moving. I jumped onto the nearest seat, then scrambled onto the seat back, reaching upwards towards the slightly ajar roof hatch. Cold night air rushed in, smelling of rain and freedom. Fingers, cold and strong, grabbed my ankle. The floral dress woman, her face a rictus of hunger, pulled with terrifying strength. I kicked out wildly with my other foot, connecting with something soft and yielding. She snarled, but her grip loosened slightly. With a final agonizing heave, I pulled myself up, tearing my ankle free from her grasp.